Hey, we're live. This Life in Tech, episode 182. I am Jason.
I'm Dan.
And I'm TK.
Oh man, dude, I was without power for like 8 hours yesterday.
What? No generator?
Not on this property. The other property has it.
You got enough chickens. You should be able to just have them running around building up energy for you.
Dude,
Put them on a treadmill. Well, there was an interruption in the force when you cut your mustache off. So
that's probably what it was, right? The world just stopped.
Big electrical disturbance.
if you need some evidence of how dumb chickens are, by the way,
I did.
Here's your evidence, just in case it's not clear how dumb they are as birds. Apparently, a couple chickens, 3, decided that it was a good idea to crawl under a fence into a dog pen.
Well, that worked out.
And the dog's old and blind, so I don't think the dog knew they were in there until my wife went over to get the chickens out, and they started squawking, and the dog killed 2 of them.
What, is it your dog?
No,
Oh.
the chickens are over on another part of the farm where Marsha's uncle lives.
Oh, okay.
And long story short, man, this is a dog that somebody else in the family had on another property here, and for whatever reason, people don't have inside dogs in the South. Apparently, everything's outside. And so having a dog consists of building a little chain link fence with a little house and just sticking your dog in there.
Not where I live.
Me either, man. Like, I think it's horrible, but that's a
Currently, my dogs are up on matching Queen Anne chairs watching me do this.
Yeah, man.
They're
Because I was like, I didn't realize your Mastiff was blind. So
No, she's not. She's inside sleeping on her dog bed.
yeah.
She was when I got up this morning anyway. But yeah, man. So chickens are pretty dumb. Like, I don't know what they were doing, but I know what they're doing now.
Being digested.
Well, yeah, man. They're collecting maggots.
Yeah.
But anyway, dumb chickens, dude. They're so dumb. They're cool though. Did I tell you the rest of our chickens came in? So we're up to minus those. We're up to 64 chickens now.
Nice.
Wow.
And how about your your fowl? Those guinea.
Oh,
fowl.
the guinea fowl?
Yeah. And they started to attack you from the trees when you're going on your walks and stuff?
No, did I tell you guys that the other day we went over there and I'm pretty sure one was up on a telephone wire? Did I tell you that?
No.
Yeah. We went over. Okay, so there's a set of guinea fowl in with the chickens. Okay, so everybody's in there. Because guinea fowl are like hyper roosters. Like, they'll just protect everything, okay? So we put the rest of them in there. And we went over to take care of the chickens and the guinea fowl that are with the chickens. And I'm telling you, man, I'm almost 100% certain that one of the light gray guinea fowl we had that broke out was up on, because they can straight up fly like geese, It was up on the telephone pole, just watching, man. So I think they're around.
I'm waiting for them they're going to start dive bombing you.
Why? Why would they dive bomb you, man?
Every time somebody talks about flying fowl, I always think of Les Nessman on WKRP. As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly.
Did I tell you about the giant turkey family? There's like 20 turkeys roaming around here.
Yeah.
A lot of wild turkeys.
Are they big? Are they big yet?
Yeah. The hens are large.
Are you working on your archery skills for Thanksgiving?
Hunting wild turkey here is really restricted. But the season for it is April to May, I think. It's not in the fall.
Of course, because that's a big turkey consumption month.
Yeah. It's not in the fall, and I think it's bow only. You can't use guns.
Well,
like
if they're on your property, isn't it fair game at that point?
No, turkeys are protected here. Whereas, like, to contrast it, deer and wild pig, you can pretty much blast at will. There's like, it's just
they're like vagrants.
Yeah. And I think if I remember when I looked at it, they're classified as open season. There's no bound to it. There's no.
I tell you what, a great, wild boar loin and certainly venison is fantastic. I mean, you go to Europe, like in Germany, they raise deer like we raise cows. Mm-hmm. Same with oxen, and it's unbelievable meat. And you never have a tough one because you're not basically tagging them with an arrow or a bullet and then letting them run around and get all the adrenaline in their body and build that lactic acid.
Right.
Yeah, and they do the same thing in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so there are a couple of restaurants in Ann Arbor, or at least one, that has venison on the menu, which I've never seen in the United States, but evidently, as it, reading the description, they were getting it from a New Zealand farm. So because of that, they were able to do it. So I was like, well, hell, when am I ever going to get a venison steak? That's it was delicious.
You can buy them in Wegmans now.
Really?
Yeah. I got a wild boar loin, and they had venison, they had elk, they had a couple other.
I really enjoy elk.
Yeah. I had friends of mine that went wild boar hunting in Georgia years ago, and they wanted to use knives, and it got more. Well, it's the old Rambo thing from the original movie where he's jumping off a tree to kill himself a pig, right?
They realized that was a movie, right? It wasn't.
Oh yeah, in theory, yes, yeah, and because the one thing about a wild boar, those tusks are no joke. Like if they tusk you, they're going to rip your calf off. Right, or whatever they dig into, right? It's coming off, but all of that, unbelievable eating. Depends. It's how you drop the animal, right? I mean, if you get them and it's quick, you make a good shot, and they don't get a chance to run around. It's going to be great. When back when I was in active, you go up to some of these army bases that you work on, and it's basically you hear tank rounds going off, and there's deer everywhere to the point where they're actually a menace as far as being out in the street. That. You'll go out there and they're like, look, it's open season right now. Just don't leave them laying out there. And a lot of these old boys that run the range control, they're all retired military guys, and they just want you to bring the deer back. They'll dress it, they'll take it. They just want the meat. They just don't want to be out in the ranges and around there shooting them and have to deal with picking them up and getting them back to you.
Yeah. Well, they are a pest in almost every state. White-tailed deer and stuff like that are strictly a pest.
I mean, even on the side of Virginia Beach I live on, it's more rural. And it's heavily around on the backside of all these neighborhoods is either federal wetlands or federal forests. And so there, you get out at night driving, you better have your high beams on as you're rolling down some of these dark roads. You're gonna eat a deer.
Yeah, which is catastrophic.
Yeah,
it's not.
A Ron White story, about his brother or nephew or something describing shooting a deer and how it's magic in the forest. He's like, he goes, I hit one going in my van at 50 miles an hour. What an elusive creature, right? And they're not. They get paralyzed when they see bright light.
Yeah. Speaking of paralyzed, so did you guys read about SANS getting fished, the certification and training organization? And it's a little mysterious to me that, it doesn't shock me that they got a phishing email sent to them. It doesn't shock me that somebody clicked on it. What shocks me is it seemed to have been running for a little bit and leaking customer information, and then somehow they had to shut down the service that was compromised. That part I don't quite understand, but the reaction in the community is interesting, where everybody's like, yeah, fuck SANS, they got hacked, screw them. Do you think it's going to damage their reputation as trainers at all?
No, I don't think so. It's two different things, right? And also, the likelihood that the person that was phished is a trainer or one of those things is probably pretty low. But and it's more likely someone in administrative staff. There's still people. They're going to fall for it. I don't think it damages them. Their training, I still think, is top notch. It's done quite well. It is expensive. I hope it makes them lower their rates. But outside of that, I don't think it does much to them at all.
What do you think, TK?
I don't think it does much at all. But I would also say, and this is from experience at multiple companies, that it might not have been an administrative person, right? And when we were at Silent Circle and we ran with, I don't know, it was Fish Me or one of the services, of the 5 or 6 people that actually clicked on the email and went with the thing, over half of them were technical people. Right? They were just, and a lot of the whole phishing thing is about diligence and being in a hurry, right? Like, look at the headers. It doesn't, or hey, I didn't, or in this case, it was like, did I order something from FedEx? If that's the first thing that runs through your head, Like you might want to start with, hey, wait a moment, Professor Plum may be in the kitchen with a candlestick on this one. I might want to slow down a little bit, right? But I think it validates their training, right? Look, if I'm their chief marketing officer, or I'm the guy out there. Look, this is hard. This is why we teach this stuff, because every day, even somebody in our organization fell for it. And I wouldn't shy away from anything like that. I'd lean into it and make it part of the sales pitch.
Yeah, I would too. And if you can trust the reporting, in this case, let's say, like I'm looking at it right now, so I can quote it. There were only 500, let's say, pieces of data leaked. So you're not talking about like some massive breach that went on for months and months and months.
But which 500? Which 500?
I don't know.
But
right?
500, because I read 28,000 records compromised.
I don't know. I'm reading the report right here from CyberScoop.
But here's how we mitigate all this going back and forth about is it 500 or 28,000? Have the CEO of the damn company come out and release a statement.
Yeah.
Here's the facts, right? Don't hide behind it. Lean into it.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you.
If we learn nothing from the Sony hack, if you listen to what the CEO said, he's like, in retrospect, I wish I would have done X, Y, and Z. And number one, you'd be out in front of it saying, here's where we're at. Here's the story we're telling, because this is the absolute truth.
Right.
I just posted a link in the chat for the article that I had found.
Okay.
Oh, from Tech Republic. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it says 28,000 records, dated August 12th.
Right. There might be like 500, and then in those 500 as parent categories, there's a set of records with each.
Oh,
that's how
maybe.
you might get that number. But I mean, it was just they got phished. Somebody clicked on a link. Like,
well, and the thing, and I'd be curious as to like how they set up their external email. So with where I'm at, and it's been this way for many of the different companies. The first thing I do is I append the body of the email, and it says, and it's highlighted, external. So it's right there. That this came from an external link, because a lot of the problems we have, and my human resources department is the worst offender of this, not in terms of being bad. The emails they send to our employees look like phishing emails. Mm-hmm. They're sending out surveys. There's links to the whatever party might be going on, and it's not so much that the phishing emails look legitimate. It's that our legitimate emails are starting to look like phishing emails. And for a lot of our employees, how are they supposed to know? Because even it still says external. And I'm kind of like, look, if it says external.
Well, I've said this before.
Don't click.
I find it mind-boggling that as a community, we decry people clicking on links and opening attachments and turn around and send them the training attachments and fucking links. Like, what are you doing? Like, I really don't understand why at this point we even have HTML email. Why isn't everything just plain
marketing?
Yeah. You think about this. What Dan, you're talking about is the social mediaization of enterprise email, right? People have like, how do I want to do this? So, well, in the old days, we would have sent out different things and, hey, respond to this and do that, or drive to this. Now it's like, hey, we send out a Google Form survey. Why? Because it's easy and it's a form that people like. It's in a format that people like to consume, right? And if you give somebody something in a format they want to consume it, they're more likely to participate.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's probably a bigger question as to, hey, how do I manage that? Is what level of social mediaization do I want my enterprise correspondence to look like?
Well, see, and what I find interesting is there seems to be somewhat of an evolution towards this, but it's like a half measure that hasn't been fully adopted yet. We have the power to develop and deploy mobile apps.
Yep.
And so, like, why do you need to send me my HR documents in PDF attachments and links through an email when you could just put it in the official company app?
Right.
And I could just get all my shit right there.
Yeah. Or as I'm trying to migrate people, official communication should stop coming from email and through your CMS. That's an internal that is linked either through Office 365 or G Suite or whatever you want.
Perfect.
And then as you tie that into the mobile application, it's a push notification.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going, oh, Yeah, and this is this is the response from every single HR department, and thankfully, I was able to convince my the CEO that this is just who cares. But their response is, what if they don't have a cell phone? And I've heard this from like multiple HR people at multiple companies. What if they don't have one? And I said, then we just say this is a part of your job. If you don't have this, then I'm sorry, you can't work here. Not having a cell phone is not a protected class.
Right.
Right. Sorry.
Well, here's the thing. What's the number? Tell me what the number is. Right? Is it 4 out of 5 dentists? Is it 10? Is it 10 million? What's the freaking SAT answer on how many people in the year 2020 do not have a smartphone? Right? Period. That's the dumbest.
I know. That's the response
I've ever heard in my life. Please, I hope your HR people are watching this. You are dumb, dummies. Right? That irritates the daylights out of me. Yeah. One person doesn't. This is the whole thing with coronavirus.
Yeah.
For the first time in our life, we're saying, hey, sick people, don't worry about protecting yourself. Let everybody else on the planet go protect yourself. And we're not going to allow any discussion other than the one that promotes an agenda that we want to promote.
Yeah.
Right? It's climate science, right? Yes, we all agree that the planet is shifting and changing and the climate's doing real things. But when you hear a guy like Al Gore 20 years ago, the science is settled. Really? The science is never settled, right? I mean, there's always something to be learned.
And we just found that with COVID-19, LA can have clean air.
It's true. Hey, this is an interesting thing. So I got some stats for you guys. So smartphones, there are 5.1 billion unique mobile users.
Yeah. And if you subtract,
so the population is 7.8 billion.
Right. So if you subtract people that don't have food and shoes and like are at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, and then you get rid of children that are too young, we average as a planet 1.3 mobile devices per human. Right. It's a little bit less in some areas, but it's like 2.5 in Russia. Right. It's crazy. No, like this is that argument. It's like, this is why I'm like, please stop.
Right. And this is where I go, look, I can get rid of the network password if they have a mobile phone.
Right.
And guess what? Like now, NIST would say, because it's multi-factor, I never need to change that password. And I'm like, well, I'm going to say, let's change it once a year in terms of the PIN. And I'm just making minimum length 8. I don't really care. It could be anything. 8 plus your mobile phone, no network password.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's a push notification through Duo. And guess what? Now people's passwords don't change. And I just eliminated like 50% of the calls to the help desk.
Do you guys want another quick stat, by the way? So I told you we were without power a major part of the day yesterday. So the three of us, my wife and my daughter and I, went to the mall, which we usually don't do. We're not big mall people.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Mall creature.
Yeah. I mean, whatever, dude. I like watching people. I like observing, and my daughter needs some clothes because she's growing fast. And so they're in a little kid store, and I'm standing outside holding the bags. And hey, man, what else am I going to do but take some observational statistics? So you can't really see it because it's all whitewashed, but I have my count. So I counted the total number of people that walked past me in this span of time, which is about 30 minutes. And I indexed them into those that were wearing their mask and those that were not or were not wearing it properly. Here's your count. I counted 20 people that did not have a mask on or were not wearing it properly. So they have it like down, right? Same categorization. You're not wearing it. Versus, I got to do some quick math.
Is it math if you're counting?
Yes. Yes, it is. Do you want to know why, by the way?
Why math? Because you're adding 1, 2, 3.
No.
Incremental?
No. The original term, arithmetic, refers to counting in the combinatoric sense. So counting as in combinations and permutations. That's where the term arithmetic actually comes from. And we co-opted it to mean doing simple sums and subtractions. But anyway, so 20 effectively not wearing a mask compared to 70 some wearing it. So you're talking about 100 people total I observed in 20, 30 minutes? Interesting, huh?
7-2 ratio.
Say what?
Basically, it was like a 7-2 ratio. So that's
somewhere in there, yeah.
Not bad.
Well, and here's the thing. Then you go, what are you wearing to cover your face? Right? Mm-hmm. I watched somebody walk in, so effectively they had a big paper dinner napkin wrapped around, you know, and it's like that's good enough. Like we're calling that good enough.
Well, evidently not for John McAfee. Did you see he got arrested? I guess it was in Sweden because he was wearing a thong over his face as a mask.
I love that dude.
Good for him.
So crazy.
Good for him.
I mean, the guy basically, he's a business guy. I don't believe he was ever really all that technical.
He is an eclectic personality that you want in the public space just for no other reason than humor.
Yeah, but I think he's in Sweden. I don't know what it is, but they essentially said, "Sorry, a thong is not enough to be able to protect you."
And did you see the photos?
I'm sure. I haven't seen the photos, but I'm sure they were pure magic.
Oh man, bless your heart, John McAfee.
Yeah, see, but I gotta bring it back up to see what area of the world he was arrested in.
No, but back to your point, why Dan's looking this up. You're right, because I had a more informal, because that was informal, but I had even more informal, soft index of, well, that's this type of mask. That is like a napkin. Like, yeah, there's no clear rhyme or reason to what people are selecting. So, like, check this out. Here's the practical impact of it. Even just a couple weeks ago, the official university policy was in a building you had to have a face covering, and face covering was not defined.
Right.
So it could have been a shield, it could have been a mask, any type of, okay. As of this week, they've come out and revised that and said the only thing that you can wear is a particular type of cloth face covering. No shields, no neck gaiters, no nothing. None of that counts.
It was a hoax. So John McAfee posted it on Twitter that he got arrested for it, and then he later admitted he was lying. That sucks, because that would have been hilarious.
Surprise, John McAfee.
Not the first time for him. That's
no. I bet you there's still people that are bitter that he hasn't paid off on the bug bounties that he promised for when his stupid wallet got popped. He's like, this is unhackable.
And whatever happened to Demon Saw?
I have no idea. I don't even know what that company did, other than throw a party at a strip club, which is really odd.
By the way, that party was horrible.
The alcohol was the alcohol they were allowing us to have was sucked too. It's like I could have made better. You know, Stoney could have made better stuff in his bathtub.
Yuck.
Yeah, you missed that party, TK, and you didn't really miss it.
It sounds like I'm glad I missed it.
Yeah. Let's have a party on top of a building in Las Vegas in August at night.
And this is the funniest thing to me. Here it is with we're literally at an event that everyone has been complaining for years. With this being DEF CON, that it is too misogynistic and all these things towards women. And John McAfee throws a party inside of a strip club. He rents out the strip club, and this is where he's going to be, promoting Demon Saw and all this kind of stuff. It's inside of a strip club.
Well, and remember, the only reason we really went is the word on the street was he was going to get arrested.
Yeah. I wanted to. Yeah, I was like,
and I really just wanted to see a train wreck. I really did. It was a morbid curiosity.
Awareness is not his thing.
Definitely not.
So Sands, yeah. So check this out. Here's another question that kind of parlays that, because I agree with you guys. I don't think it impacts their brand negatively, and it's not a big news story. You kind of have to dig to find it. What's clever is because the term Sands is so closely associated with the word hack in their training.
Yeah.
Like if you
the SEO is not going to come up. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
So was it their training side or was it their university side that got it?
it doesn't. I haven't seen anything that clarified. So, which makes me think back to your point. It was more of like their parent administrative function.
But I'm a big believer. Be transparent. Get that out there. Be radically transparent with what happened and why, because that's how you keep the trust and that you have earned over the years by being the provider of those. Use it as an educational moment.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Turn it into a case study.
And then refer them to a course that they can take to make sure it doesn't happen to them. Right? I mean, come on. It's marketing 101, folks. It's not hard.
It's not like they're Symantec.
Or Checkpoint. So why do you think other, because Sands
also not sponsors.
So Sands tends to be fairly well regarded, even if people agree it's I think it's fair to say it's overpriced in some ways. It's
not overpriced because people keep paying for it, right? It becomes overpriced when people stop paying for it and make them lower their prices.
That's a fair point. Why do you think other certifications like EC Council, CEH are so disregarded? What is it? Is it the name? Is the training superfluous?
So, I mean, I think the big reason is for Sands, it's pretty much it's hands-on. You're learning hands-on stuff. The CEH is largely a study of, read a book, pass a test. It's more closely associated with entry-level certification. Sands are advanced. Like you are not going to just pass a Sands certification by reading their book, because you're literally having to do it's hands-on. It's hands-on training as well as the academic side in terms of lecture. CEH, not so much. The CompTIA, Security Plus, Network Plus, Server Plus, Linux Plus, those entry-level ones, it's read a book, pass a test. Some of their other ones from like CompTIA, you got to do a little bit more things, but still, it's mainly read, it's lecture. You don't need hands-on. I'm not even sure if CompTIA has anything that requires hands-on at this point. Also, the same reason why the advanced penetration testing one,
OSCP.
Yeah, same thing. It's hands-on. It's hands-on. So when you get that, it's more heavily regarded. SANS certifications are more heavily regarded because it requires a lot of hands-on. You just can't read a book and pass a test. Dude, I remember this guy came into a lot of money when I worked at XM Radio, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to be a CCIE." Like he was a friend of a friend, and we're at a party. He's like, "Yeah, I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to buy all the equipment and go do it." Well, he was a smart guy. He could pass the written tests, but when it came to the hands-on, I don't know anyone that's going to go, you can build a lab all day long you want, but not a whole lot of stuff's going wrong in a lab, environment typically in terms of real traffic going through it. He could never pass the actual hands-on because he was never working in a live environment. He never worked in networking at all. Right. So he could pass the written tests for the CCIE, but he couldn't get down there to take the labs. He kept failing.
Well, and when you and I were coming up in the game, that was like the premier. If you had a CCIE, you were top tier. For sure. Yeah. Because of that, it was 2 or 3 days?
2 days.
Site.
2 days.
On site, right?
Day one for the on-site, in which at the time there was only like 4 places in the United States. You had North Carolina. So when you went to North Carolina, you were going to hit the SNA protocol, which was an IBM protocol for backups, basically. So you knew where you went was based on what was going to be more heavily done. But it was 2 days. Day one, you have to set everything up. Then overnight, they
wreck it.
They wreck it, and you've got the next day to
go in and repair it,
fix it. So that's why I think that the training is because it's more hands-on. They also make it exclusive, so there is an aspect from the marketing piece behind it. You're not buying a SANS book on Amazon. They heavily guard their training materials. You're not.
OSCP is the same way. Like you cannot get that stuff anywhere else.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and then let me ask you a question. Then both of you is
So it's kind of like Apple. It's overpriced garbage. No, I'm just joking.
Also not a sponsor.
It's relative though, and this is why I was saying about Sands. The perception of Sands being overpriced. It's relative. I agree. In its true form, it's not overpriced. That's what the market's willing to pay. Typically, because in my experience, it's companies that send their employees.
There you go.
They have the money. It's the same reason why. It's the same reason why the academic grant system is the way it is, or why journals charge so much. Well, because it's the university paying for it, not an individual. But anyway, so let's say a person has a CEH. Do you view them differently if it's their first and only certification, but they just graduated undergrad or from a 2-year, versus let's say if I had a CEH and it was my only credential, and I'm like mid-end career?
No, I mean, I would say depends on as to how it's being brought up. Like, oh yeah, I just passed my CH. Great. Can you tell me what the Nmap command is in order for a SIN scan? Because it's one of the things that's on the test. What is the command for fingerprinting the operating system?
Right.
Well, so if you're like, oh yeah, I just decided to go get my CH because I needed it for something, blah blah blah, like I'm probably not going to do anything. But if you're leading with, oh yeah, I just got this, well, it's the same thing as if you're leading with my favorite class that I took in undergrad was networking. Great, draw me up a network and show that's got 10 different branches and show me where area 0 is for OSPF. Like it would be the same type of thing if they said that it just depends on how they led the conversation. It's going to determine it in an interview perspective. But I think TK should go get his CEH.
Well, I want to hear TK's opinion because we've talked about it like just informally. Before you answer, let me give you the proper context. I've been thinking about certifications in terms of their instructional value. Like, how do we impart knowledge to people and standardize what that is to a broader group, right? And it's weird because you have certifications which exist in one vertical. You have 2-year trade school or community college, which is its own thing, which is close to the certification. And a lot of times their programs are funded by those vendors. And then you have 4-year, which is different. And like when my daughter's 16 and she wants to get into tech and she asks me, what should she do? Like, how do you navigate that? That's kind of why I'm asking you these questions. So there you go.
And before TK answers, and that kind, like I like CompTIA for those things.
Sure.
And I think if computer science, cybersecurity is going to be a profession, there should be a certification. It's no different than a CPA. It's no different than an ACE mechanic, right? It level sets in terms of at least an academic knowledge, and you have to keep requiring education credits in order to maintain it. No different than any other profession.
But this is a really important distinction. So sorry, TK, I really do want to hear what you have, but we gotta clarify this, okay? A mechanic gets certified, okay, through a certification. A doctor or a lawyer has to pass a board exam and be licensed.
Sure.
Not the same thing, right? That's why doctors and lawyers have communities of practice, and that defines the term profession. Mechanics don't have that. That's what separates the two. And that's why one is a professional school. But this is important because what is computer science? It's kind of both.
It is, and this is why I tend to lend it more towards the aspect of a CPA, right? You're still passing a test, and you have to maintain that. Now, there's no board certification that they have to go through, but a CPA still, in order to maintain their CPA, has to do continuing education credits, and it's a test. That they don't. The only requirement is you have to have a 4-year degree in accounting, essentially, right? So that's their basis on it, and I tend to lean it more towards that. Whereas like the ACE certified mechanic is going to kind of be like the guy that works Geek Squad and Best Buy. Make sure they got their A+ certification so they understand how computer parts work.
What do you think, TK?
I forgot the question. I'm a big believer, you guys know this, that education just for education's sake, go learn something today. Right? I'm a big believer in that. I think when you say CEH, there's things I when I was in another job, they brought in a person to teach CEH. I basically said I'm not doing it because I had other things to do, and they were like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "Look, I'm not here to do entry level stuff, but it's not. I don't have time for this." And
are you too good for that, TK?
Actually, I was that week. No, not really, but I was doing something else, right? And when I met the instructor the first morning, I was like, okay, I'm not going to enjoy this experience with this guy, because this guy was super know-it-all guy, right? And he's the guy that the CH people. I don't know through whom they got it, because I didn't set the training up. But it was a big deal to one of my peers, because he thought that was a gate, like with people that didn't really know anything, like some of our students. Saying I'm a certified ethical hacker sounds fancy, right? About Tuesday of the test, the other 4 or 5 guys that were in there were ready to like do bodily harm to themselves and others, because the guy didn't know what he was doing, right? So they just got all the training materials and effectively studied and passed the test. Like you said, I don't have to do anything. I just have to pass the test, right? Now, in anything in life, right, having a credential is sometimes important, right? And I think when you look at the breadth of cybersecurity, top, like entry level to badass red team, blue team guys is the best in the world. There's a big gap, right? And it's a big gap in overall education. How do we define that? I personally look at like the folks that are going to be server admins and all these other, they're kind of the entry level tasks. That's kind of like welding and carpentry. It's a trade school thing. It's the blue collar jobs of the 21st century. They're highly necessary. You can feed your family. You can send your kids to school on that, but it's the base of the pyramid, and it has to be done correctly, right? And then as you move up through cybersecurity education, from high school, right? Because effectively you can start these kind of things in high school through whatever level of education you get, all the way through terminal degrees. You're now starting to say, we're going to address the roughly 3 million cyber jobs that are going unfilled right now because we don't have competent people to fill them. More importantly, in the same way that we say, hey, you know what? We need to have enough doctors. Why? Because it's a really important function to keep society moving in the right direction is to make sure that we have enough medical professionals to take care of the citizenry. Well, how many things do you do now that don't, at some level, trace back to somebody sitting behind a desk on a computer performing some function to creep a network up, to keep it secure so that we can have an easier, bigger, better, faster life? Almost entirely. So if we're going to say that we agree that one of the most important functions now is to make sure that we keep the lights on electronically, right? Well, so how are we testing people, and what's the educational credentials that are required? Is it going and take a written test followed by a practical test to prove proficiency? I like that idea, because along the way you're going to have to get educated but there's a lot of different ways to get educated, right? I could go to one of the STEM programs in high school and leave with all my Microsoft certs and say, I'm going to go to college in a more non-traditional way at night, whatever, but I'm going to go get a job. You find somebody like either one of you on a job that is a natural educator and wants to teach people, they're going to start to grow in ways they never imagined they would, right? Where does the educational snobbery end, right? And where does it start and where does it end? It can't start at the bottom, right? And I think a lot of times, and it's worse in the government bureaucracy, people are credential collectors.
Yeah, sure.
Right? They're just going to go get credentials, right? And that's really the big joke is like, how many letters can I get after my name on LinkedIn, right? And it's how much you really know, right? And I think Dan's point of, well, okay, great. You say you're great at networking, boom, prove it, right? I took a networking class years ago, and I really enjoyed it. I like the concept of the thing. But do you want me going out and doing it every day of the week? Hell no, right? Not even close, right? But when this isn't a conversation just for technology, right? Because the conversation in technology is this: if I hire somebody for a cybersecurity job, I'm stealing them from somebody else because there's zero unemployment. Right. So where's the big delta? The big delta is in what environment do we train people? Right. Both of you have said that institutionally universities have an aversion towards building big cyber labs and having cyber ranges because, oh man, you're teaching these people how to hack. What if they go out and do this? Right. It's a fundamentally flawed paradigm because nobody's ever asked the chemistry department, hey, these guys can build bombs after we're done, or bioethics, all of that stuff, right? Are you going to use your powers for good or evil? Right. Well, in order to be great, in order to be great defensively, you probably should know how the offense works, right? Some of the best defensive coordinators in professional football were offensive football players. Tony Dungy invented one of the best defenses ever. He started out as a quarterback in college, right? So he understood the offensive side of the way it works. This melts itself in education. This melts itself down in a lot of different ways, and I think we've talked about this before, right? Teachers in America, right? They perform one of the absolute most important functions on earth to make sure the next generation of kids aren't the biggest collection of dumbasses that we have, right? And it's how we.
So is that why we have cancer culture then?
Well, I'll get you there, right? But think about this. We tried to say to the teachers years ago, hey, we want you to take a professional exam to prove competency because we believe that what you do is so important. Their retort was, well, we don't get paid like it. Okay, I agree. There's where you negotiate, right? Then we want to negotiate. They didn't want to take a test, right? And states that tried to do this early before the fervor caught up with, no, we're not going to do this. They administered the test wrong. They give a generalized test. Well, if you're, elementary school educator, yes, that's probably a good test to give people. But if you're a high school teacher and you teach science, why are you taking a history test? I don't care whether you know history. I want you to do two things. I want you to be good at the subject matter you teach, and I want you to be really good at English as well. Because the only time you should not grade the written or spoken word is in English class, right? So every teacher should be functionally literate in writing and speaking, and they should be a good subject matter expert. All right. Now, because that was a bridge too far with teachers unions around the country, legislators had to have the appearance of doing something to take care of the kids. So what do? They put standardized testing on the kids.
Right.
The biggest single problem in public education, in my mind, is parental apathy. Right. Now, one of the reasons people are going crazy for COVID shutting down the schools or slowing the roll of when we can put kids back into schools is because there's a babysitter aspect to it, right? And the most insidious part about all this is that, and I'll use the state of Virginia as an example, you give the kids a test and you tie federal funding to success on that test. So what do you think the teachers are doing? Do you think they're giving the kids a zest for knowledge and learning and how to go? If I don't know something, how do I go figure that out? If something's important to me, how far do I dig? Where do I go? No, they're going to teach them the test. I'm not blaming the teachers. The teachers have to teach them the test because the federal funding's tied to it, right? And so when you say, I want to have a discussion about credentials, it starts in kindergarten. It's not, it's this with the basic stuff. And then by the time you get out to where people want to brag on LinkedIn and start putting, agile development now, you want to talk about a target-rich environment for multiple acronym credentials afterwards, you can put 8 or 10 different things after your name, right? But in my case, if I was doing that, I just put the highest one I have because it presupposes that you have all the other ones under it.
Right.
Right. I'm going to go get my A+ certification.
See, but that's a good follow-up question. So, like, Dan, when you were talking about hiring and asking people questions, so if I come in with a Network Plus, it's probably reasonable for you as the interviewer to question my knowledge and get me to demonstrate it somehow through let's call it a technical interview process, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas if I come in with a CCIE, you're probably not going to do that, right?
No, I still would.
I would. Really?
Yeah. I don't care.
Why?
Because I still believe that there are people out there that can eventually get the certification. Even though my buddy Rob did not pass, I believe there are people out there that could. So I would still ask you to walk through the process of troubleshooting. My question is going to be a lot more challenging, for someone that says they have a CCIE versus someone who just has a Network Plus. But I still would.
So then,
just like people ask me, constantly, in interview questions, why is patching such a difficult thing? Well, or why should we be paying this much attention to patching? They'll ask the questions, and I still would want to know. You may have gotten a CCIE, but maybe your CCIE happened 10 years ago, and you want to get back into networking.
What do you guys think about this then? Is one of the flaws, and maybe it's unresolvable, of certification as a snapshot, is that it demonstrates that you were able to do something, not the means by which you were able to do it. And what we're actually really interested in an interview is somebody demonstrating how they do it, not that they can do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than if I was hiring for a CFO. All right, I'm going to assume they know accounting, all right? Because that's just what they're. But I want to know, how are they going to evaluate projects to be able, especially from a technology standpoint, where the perceived value on any technology project, you don't necessarily know what the net present value is. So I'd want them to walk me through a process as, hey, we're going to move to the cloud, and it looks like it's an expense. How are you going to evaluate the net present value and help the technology folks in order to show the business benefit? Because there's a lot of things in there that don't have a tangible value, right?
Well, Dan, you just said the key thing. Somebody shows up and they want to be the CFO of your company. You already have put them in a box and said, I know they have to know accounting, right? But that's the nuts and bolts, right? That's blocking and tackling, right? What you're saying is, I want you to have very acute FP&A skills.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if you look, I'm thinking now, because I think of the Cardinal at SC, right? That dude volunteered. He wanted to be FP&A. Why? Because he'd done other things and he wanted to be a CFO at some point. And he realized that no matter what skill I have, until I can help properly evaluate each action and and dovetail it into part of the whole, I'm not going to be as successful or as valuable to a company as I possibly could be. Right? I would go to him all the time. I'm like, hey, look, here's the outcome that I want, and here's 3 ways I think we can do it. Which one is going to be the best, and also, but which one, and tell me why, right? Because sometimes the best is the least damaging, right? Because it's going to be a big pill we got to eat. Let's try to do this with the least negative effect possible, right? But that's really I think when you talk about certificates and thing, right? The concept of hiring, you're looking at resumes, right? And that's, I think, tragically, like, this whole resume process is tragically flawed now, because if you're good at looking at the job description and then messing about with your resume to get the right keywords, you can start hopping through the system relatively quickly. And certs are a big part of that, right? Must have, boom, and there's a list of certs. Well, okay, great, I got all that. I'm going to move to the next level. But do you want that guy? Or do you want somebody that's very inquisitive and naturally has a propensity to drive towards finding the right answer? And more importantly, is a culture fit, right? It's like Warren Buffett says, hey, I want people that are smart. I want people that are educated. I want people with integrity. And if you don't have number 3, the first 2 don't matter.
Right.
So who am I looking for? What am I looking for? I think when you start saying, with regards to certs, you start to glean a little bit about integrity, right? Because is this guy, did he go get XYZ cert just so that he could put it in there to move to the next wicket in an HR thing? And hey, what is it? Hey, I just got the cert. It's part of continuing education development on me. I don't have the most practical skills in it right now, but one of the things I'm hoping to do is to get experience doing that while I'm here. That's a great answer.
Sure.
It might not be the answer you want to hear, but the guy, it mitigates everything you're thinking in your head about, does this guy know anything or not?
Right.
So I take it back for the CFO. I would ask them one accounting question. Would you prefer to be, IFRS or GAAP, and why?
That's a good question. That is a really good question.
Yeah, and it's the same. And I put it back to, I just recently hired a network engineer. I said, okay, you're designing a network, and he's got his CCNP. All right, so it's a step below the CCIE for those that don't know. Cisco Certified Network Professional, right? So it's a certification that I held back in the day. It's pretty tough. So I asked, okay, you're building a network from scratch. and I don't care which networking equipment. It could be all Cisco, Juniper mix, whatever you want. I don't really care about that. But which routing protocol do you go with and why? And I don't care necessarily which one it is, as long as they don't give me some silly link state like IGRP. But if you would have said, oh, it's going to be an all Cisco network and we're just going to do EIGRP, okay, great. Why? And because I prefer OSPF. I prefer that because I know at some point in time I'm probably going to have something that's not Cisco in there, and I don't like to go with proprietary protocols. Well, this cat went with ISIS, and I'm like, oh, okay, interesting.
Different answer.
I'm like, why? Because, so for those that don't know, big, large enterprises tend to do one of two, BGP or ISIS. But when they display it to the world, it's BGP, Border Gateway Protocol. So he went with ISIS, and I don't remember his exact answer, but I went, okay, that's different. His logic was sound, and those are things that I want to know the reason as to why. I don't have to agree with the protocol, because then again, I'm not the person that's going to be doing it anymore. But I want to know why you think that. And I think a certification by itself doesn't tell you the why. It just tells you what. It just defines the what on things, but not the why.
It also tells you that somebody went the extra mile as opposed to somebody else to say, I want to go learn, I want to have knowledge.
Yeah.
And I want to quantify it.
Yeah. And to use an interviewer, doesn't it tell you to what level you can ask questions? Or better yet, let me rephrase that actually. A certification communicates to you as the interviewer what level of resolution my answers to your question should be at, right? So if I have a Network Plus, you should expect a certain level of detail and technical acumen in my answer compared to if I have a CCIE, because you could ask the exact same question, but you're expecting two different types of answers, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
This is the absolute best interview I've ever witnessed. And I didn't have to go through it because it wasn't a job that I was doing. So in the military, you have EOD guys, the bomb disposal guys. For those of you that don't know, most of bomb disposal today is automated. It's robots, right? Cameras and robots and picking the thing up and doing it. But for, especially for a lot of the stuff that happens in specialized communities, you still have to get your hands on that device, right? One of the programs that has a big component of people having to think on their feet about device management, basically how to disarm them. They're a great interview. They did the interview like the rest of everybody else, like the rest of the, everybody else that was non-EOD guys. And then they got put into a room. There's a device there. And on these devices, there's a red light. Like the red light goes off, it just went off, right? And it's a game of operation, so to speak, right? You get the red light, you lose. And they have cameras all over the room, and they just let the operator go in there and he starts working the problem. And they have a certain amount of time. And they don't care what happens. They know at some point the red light's going to go off because it's a very complex problem. But what they're looking at is his thought process, right? And how do I get from A to B? And they'll stop and they'll ask questions. So why are you doing that? And like, well, and they won't comment. They'll say, well, okay, why did you choose to do that at this juncture?
Right.
And what we're saying is, okay, were you getting tired, frustrated, and pissed off? Because that's how you get dead. Like, you lose a bubble, you get in a hurry to die, right? Is what we say, right? And it was a magical thing, right? If you take that all the way forward, there was like an EOD competition, right? Mm-hmm. And it was all the EOD guys, different, from federal law enforcement to military and stuff like that. Well, the guys that we worked with, they went up there and they were last, right? And basically you walk in and you have 2 hours to deal with this big device. And everybody else spent the entire 2 hours. Everybody got blown out. Our guys walked in, walked around the bomb, looked at each other and laughed for about 5 minutes, turned around and walked out and said, it's not going to go off, and went out. Well, at some point, they just forgot that when they were resetting the device after last year, they forgot to plug the power supply back in. Right. And so they're because they're very hands-on, it was very easy for them to look at it. So they plug it back in, had them go out. They walked in and they spent like an hour and they go, why are we going to touch this thing? Right. And they think, what do you mean? And they came in and they deconstructed mentally the device, like basically schematic, like here's what you have. We're going to draw it out. This is how you built it, and this is why it's not going to do this, right? Because everything they do is very hands-on. And they're like, great, you guys win. You got the job, right? And they didn't want it. They just wanted to go up there and pit their skills against everybody else. Everybody in that competition went to EOD school, right? They got the CEH, they got the cert, they got out of it. And everybody did well. But it's not an environment where you can be a B student, right? And that's the difference. That's what everybody's looking for. They're looking for the A student. And how do I make that practical? And that's why there's, the old Google question, why are manhole covers round, right? I'm not here to test your knowledge. I know you're smart, right? Do you have common sense, right? Do you have, I think a great question to ask on an interview, and it says you really want to throw somebody off, is tell me 3 things you think we have in common. You never met the person. Like, you're sitting across the table from an interview. Tell me 3 things you think you have in common. You're going to find out a lot about that person.
Yeah.
Right? Because they have a perception.
We both have gray hair in our beard. We're both wearing glasses. We're both wearing a hat. There you go.
Right. But again, that tells me a lot about the person, right? There's no introspection. There's no, I really didn't look the guy up.
Yeah.
Right? Because let's say I'm interviewing that person. I ask them a question. Right? And one of the things that's going to come out is, well, I know this is where you have to have where I like a little bit of humility and people being able to make fun of themselves, right? Because we all think that's very important in a work environment. You can't walk in and know everything. And the quicker everybody that's in the building knows that the senior people don't have such an opinion of themselves that they know everything, the quicker things get done, and they get done correctly, right? But it's be like, well, it would be like if I walked in and somebody asked me that question, I go, well, I know it's not the fact that I went to Harvard and got my MBA because I didn't like you, right? Now you have the opportunity, if you're smart and you're thinking, to say, I'm going to be a little bit more self-effacing, but more importantly, I'm going to let you know that I researched you. I researched the company, right? And it might be something like, hey, along the road, I think we both did these career moves, because you let their resume, online, wherever they said they were at, as a stepping stone to the next bigger thing, right? But then again, we both have gray hair, we both like blue suits, obviously, and we both wear glasses. Great, you're not thinking, Plus, now I'm starting to get people into a position where they can open up about themselves and tell me things that I probably couldn't with direct questions.
Yeah, that's a big thing. If you just allow people to talk and you truly listen, boy, can you learn a lot.
Absolutely.
People want to talk. People want to tell you everything.
Right.
And that's the thing that I always tell when people ask for advice in an interview. So what tends to make people feel like they had a good interview is when the interviewer does a lot of the talking. Because that interviewer comes like, wow, I had a really good conversation. Yeah, you talked about yourself, right? So on the other side, you want to be doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be doing most of the talking when I'm the interviewer. But when I'm being interviewed, I want them to be doing all the talking.
Yeah.
It's a psychology aspect.
Right. But again, as the interviewee, one of the great things that I think it's a great leveler when, they're asking you, because it's going to come up. Do you have any questions? Right. And there's a lot of ways you can eliminate yourself with the first thing that comes out of your pile. Right. But even start asking questions before they ask you to ask questions.
Yeah.
If you have any, right? You said, I don't want to turn the tables from, I want to listen, because I'm interviewing that company as much as they're interviewing me. And there's only so much you can find out online.
Right.
Right. And they're always like, hey, don't bring up vacation policy or anything like that. Well, I'm not going to ask that question. I don't want to know what the vacation policy is because I want to take a lot of vacation. I want to know how you view me in the workplace and how much of my time becomes your time. Yeah. I'll give you everything I have. Don't make me feel like I owe it to you. Mm-hmm. Right? Hey, Spartacus, we're creating a transaction here. I'm going to do some stuff for you, and you're going to give me money. And then there's a bunch of satellite things that are around that make me a complete human when I want to show up there and be really happy and engaged that I'm there. Right? For all you people out there that are going to go interview, you're going to interview with a senior person. Hey, tell me tell me the top 3 things that I can do for you the first 90 days I'm here. Right? To make your life and the company's existence better. Immediately, you've already put in his mind that he wants to have you there because you're solving his problems. And it says that, hey, I'm here to solve problems. What are the problems that you need solved? Whatever else you said, he just forgot about, or she, right? And let the HR people deal with the one-on-one questions. But if you're going to get in, you're going to talk to a person. Hey, I want to know what I'm getting myself into. And I also want to say that I understand that part of the transaction is I'm here to solve problems. I'm not here just to show up every day.
Right.
And if you can't effectively articulate why you're hiring somebody for this job, right? Because that's part of it, right? Somebody left or somebody's leaving, or we open them. Why does this exist? Because contribution margin says, hey, if you're going to pay me, I'm here to solve a problem. What is that problem that I'm here to solve? And more importantly, there's the tactical problem that you're looking at, the one that's right in front of your face, and there's a strategic solution so that we don't have to keep revisiting these problems. So let me articulate that, right? And that's what I think every boss wants. I mean, there's a company that folks have asked, some people have said, hey, would you mind taking a look and think about going down there and working? I looked online. They're a big company. And they're older, and it was a family-owned company that's been around for almost 60 years. If you go online, their customer satisfaction is out of 5 stars is about 2.3. Their employee satisfaction out of 5 stars is less than that. It's almost impossible. It's almost an impossible number, right? So, when I had an initial conversation with somebody, I was like, you have a culture problem, right? From the top down. And they're like, yeah, that's why they're trading out they got a new investor or new investors, and they are saying, hey, look, this thing it makes a lot of money already, but we could be doing so much better. We could do so much more growth, right? If I end up interviewing for that, it's going to be like, hey, what, obviously I have in my head what I think's wrong, but I want to know what you think is wrong, because I also want to know where you've placed value on what you're solving, right? Because if you're misplaced and misaligned in what you think is wrong, or you don't have the humility in you to walk in and go, hey, look, we got to do a lot of work with a lot of people and gain some trust and confidence. And if that's what you want, this is what I'm good at. Don't ask me to do these things over here. I'll work with the team that does that, but it's not what I enjoy. And where I'm at in my career, this is where I think I can really help you. But before that, I want to know what you think is important. Because if I don't think it's important, then we have to have a discussion. Because when I show up, I'm going to, you're asking me to solve a problem. Do you want me to solve the problem, or do you want me to solve the problem the way you think it should be solved? All right. And what's your kind of cone of error and where I can walk around in, right? So I tell people all the time, when you ask questions before they ask you to ask questions.
Yeah, I think that's
absolutely. Because what's going to happen is during the interview, you're kind of nervous to begin with because you're putting your best face on, and it comes back to that everybody has a chapter of the book they don't read out loud. I can get you to talk about that chapter, I win, and I want you to talk about it, right? Because I truly believe that in struggle and failure is where you become a better person, right? Mm-hmm. Don't tell me how successful you are, right? I can read that in your resume. Right. In fact, I don't really care about your resume. Right. I don't really care what mechanism got you in front of me. Now I want to talk to you as a human being, and I want to find out, are you the type of person that is going to do good care and feeding of not only the problem that we're trying to solve, but the people that we're trying to solve it with. Right. And I'm going to sometimes say the answer is people are going to self-select, right, and say this isn't for me. But I've got empathy and accountability along the way. And you hear some, what's the worst day of your life, right? That's a great question to talk to. And even you get out in social situations and stuff like that. I'll go to the 2 ears, 1 mouth theory, right? Or this, it's one of my favorite statements. It's like, when you're talking, you just are reiterating what you already know. When you're listening to somebody, you double your knowledge because now you know what you know, and you're starting to learn what they know. And I think that's very important when it comes to people feeling whole, right? And that's why, Dan, you're totally correct. That interviewer, if you allow him to open up and talk about himself, the company, hey, how did you get to this career path? I want to be a CEO someday. What point did you decide that's what you wanted to do? And how have the stops along the way manifested itself, right? It's really, if you treat the interview like an interrogation, right? There's things I don't want to talk about as the interviewee, and there's things that I do want to talk about. And I'll talk about those limited set of things, right? And if you as the interviewer or the interrogator, I can get you to talk about them more deeply, I win, right? A lot of times it's really good because people need to, be radically honest with themselves when they're doing that. But as the interviewee, if I can get you sidetracked talking about something that you really want to talk about, you're going to like, man, what a nice guy. It's like Office Space.
Yeah.
Right? Peter, what a straight shooter that guy is. Right? He just walked in and said, hey, here's the state of the company. Here's how I feel about it. I'm not trying to be obstinate, but I got 8 bosses. Right? And now you start highlighting things that are there. In an initial interview, it's like turn it around and go, hey, I'm really interested to see how did you get where you're at? And then you start to see the feathers come out and everybody wants to talk about that. And you walk out of there, you've gotten your point across. You've also said, hey, I'm a sensitive human being that wants to absorb knowledge from others. And that guy's going to walk out of there with a really warm feeling because he felt he was taken care of in the interview as much as you were.
Yep. Also true. I mean, some of my favorite questions asked the more senior people are, tell me about some of your mentors, and then following it up with, tell me about some of your mentees.
Yeah.
If they're a senior level person and they can't tell me a lot about who they're mentoring, I'm not interested in them.
Well, I think from the outset, this is like that rehearsal. So, and we've talked about this as just off air and just in normal conversation. For a CEO, I think a good question is, and I used to think this was the perfect question. It's actually not, right? But it's a good question is, how many people who's your posse, right? How many people, when you take a new leadership position, immediately you can call them and they'll come over and start working for you, right? Because sometimes with toxic leaders, people just want to get away.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, oh, great, I'm glad he's leaving. And they won't have a culture of people that'll follow him. And I used to think that was a great question to ask somebody. I still think it's a good one, right? Because again, you get people talking about themselves. And if they have people, it preens their ego that I have these great guys and girls that follow me wherever I go, right? The other half of that speaks to narcissism. And there are leaders that they have a group of people that follow them because they've habitually overpaid them. And now they've got a lifestyle and they don't want to drop out of that lifestyle. Right. And so they're going to go and they're thinking, most of them, because if you're dealing with a narcissist, you're going to have to deal with some really adverse behavior, is they will ignore that adverse behavior to get the paycheck. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's really what they want. Right. Is, hey, I don't want dissent. If you've got a really good idea, run it through me so I can make it my own. And in the absence of leadership, don't really lead. Right? Act like you're leading, but make sure everybody knows that I'm actually from behind leading, right? Whether you are or not. And it's how narcissists get CEO jobs, right? They walk into a room of the board and they've got a solution for everything. And nobody ever asks them about their worst day.
Right.
Right. Nobody digs into the adverse behaviors on the side, whether it's, hey, I create a toxic work environment by yelling and screaming, or I'm a sexual harasser, I'm this and that. I think we're on some of those fringe, what used to be considered to be fringe things, we're narrowing down on it a little bit because the public eye is in the moment right now. That's a big thing. But there's behavior. You see, it's like, hey, what are you willing to tolerate for monetary success? Right. And I think so when you're talking about interviewing people, is it a board interviewing for a CEO of a company that's not doing that well? Is it I'm hiring a junior developer right out of college and then everything in between? And I think as a leader, and you've got to be creative. And my personal opinion is get HR out of that process as much as you can, other than nuts and bolts, right? Because HR has gone from being a cost center to now wanting to be your partner,
Right.
in a lot of companies. And it's like, no, you perform a function, right? You're the fence between us and between management and the employees and you're there to take care of the employees for their healthcare, all those things that HR does, but I don't want you to be their union rep.
Right.
Right?
You're a
what are the rules, and let's do that. But you're not a partner with me on this, right? I'm going to have to take care of that person every day of the week, and that's a solemn task to me, right? And I'm not messing around with it. And if you think that you're involved in that after we make the hire, you're not, right? And even as one of the senior leaders, hey, we got to go out and get better healthcare next year. We screwed the pooch on that. Right. So next year we got to do better. And that's, now give HR a task they should be really good at. Go find me the most for the least. Right. And things like that. Right. You know what I mean? But I think, you have to have an honest conversation with everybody. When you're going to start hiring people, you have to have an honest conversation with all the stakeholders and say, here's what I expect from everybody.
Yep.
Then it doesn't lead to a disjointed hiring cycle. How many times have you gone through a hiring process where it just seems like the left hand in the company doesn't know what the right hand is doing?
Constantly.
Right. But why is that? Because that hiring manager, the CEO, has not gone in and said, okay, we're getting ready to do this round of people. This is what I want to see.
Yeah. Right? Here's an example as to why I don't think HR necessarily is, the partner that they claim to be. So 2 examples, and I get this with most HR departments. One, I try to explain that we want to hire people when they're available, not necessarily when we have a job opening. So I want all of my positions to constantly be posted, because if I get a rock star, I'm going to switch around. Basically, I'm going to be, if I was playing poker, I'm going to ask for, a couple of cards. I'm going to be able to shuffle them any which way. I've got 10 positions, and if I find something, I'll rearrange accordingly. I want the rock star when the rock star is available. Because if I have to go looking for a rock star when I need one, I'm not going to find it. So HR always is saying, I don't want to do that. The next is when it's time to let someone go. Oh no, we've got to deal with this. We have to deal with this. They become that union rep, and I'm like, sorry, I said, this is at will employment. I am not firing them, which I always tend to look at. If I have to let someone go, it's because I couldn't reach them. So I really do look at it as a failure on my part in many ways. But there are some times where it's not a good fit. You're not a part of the culture that I'm trying to create, because culture will eat your company strategy for breakfast every day of the week. I don't care how good your strategy is. If your culture sucks, it doesn't matter. So if this person's not meeting it, I'm not looking to have 3 write-ups. You're literally making it to where this person is going to cause a toxic environment for that much longer. I'm not, I am not letting this person go because of their age, because of their ethnicity. And here's what it is: if they want to take this up in court, no problem. They're not being let go because of their being a protected class. So right. HR, oh, we have to do this. No, sorry, I don't. Show me legally where we're at. This is why we have lawyers.
Lawyers. Exactly right.
If they want to do that, then fine. Let them sue. And then we can just countersue for a basically frivolous lawsuit.
There's a process to handle that.
The performance
it's not the same process as
the performance improvement plan, or the PIP program in any organization, is the absolute silliest thing. We've talked about this before. You have Pierce's law, right? In any organization, the square root of the total number of people assigned to a task are doing over 50% of the work. So if you have 100 people on a task, 10 people are giving you over 50% of the value. Mm-hmm. Trade the bottom third out as fast as you can. Go get a new bottom third, right? Most of those people will self-select. It's most easily defined in sales, right? Because it's very straightforward, right? Here's your number. You're 30% of your number, go home, right? There's some companies, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I have a friend that one of his best friends worked at this company for 24 years, made his number every quarter, missed his number one quarter, they got rid of him. 24 years. That's a good batting average, right? Basically struck out at the plate once, and they're like, yeah, you're out here, And
in sales, your job's only good 90 days at a time.
Right. But this concept that we've got to work with these people, and in sales is, again, it's easier. It's a lot harder to define. Like, how do I do that with a junior developer? Right. How do we define that? Right. Or how do I do that with somebody in the accounting department to go, you're really, thing. It's a lot harder. Sales is black and white, right? You've got either you made your number, or you didn't. Right. And if you're, what do we end up doing in life? Right. We put all our effort into those bottom third people. Right. And in sales, what do? You end up putting a lot more metrics into your CRM system and all this other stuff. Well, the top people have to do all this stuff too. They're not the problem. Whatever metrics you had, and I think they're out there making. Well, now you start to make the administration onerous on them, and they're going to tell you to pack sand. And when you're talking about always having open recs, right? The reason is, hey, if for some reason you're not getting in sales, like now rolling into Q3, you're not getting top people. You're getting people that couldn't make their number somewhere else that are being asked to leave, right? Yep. Because the rock stars are going to want to show up January 15th after they got their bonus for the previous year.
Yeah, I mean, it's an HR aspect. I mean, everything comes back down to it. This is, again, HR, and we go this every year with performance reviews. Let's focus on your weaknesses. And they'll hide it with things like, this is your opportunities for growth. Bullshit. Yeah. You double and triple down on people's strengths. The science on this from research is very clear. It is very, very clear.
Yep.
You as leaders, we build our teams around where their weaknesses are with bringing in other people, that their strengths become the weakness, because that's why you have a team, right? And it's very evident at the C-suite, right? You don't want the CFO should not really know how to do anything about technology, right? They might know how to use their tech, but they're not going into the servers, right? No. That's why we have these different people running these departments, right? So as we get down to it, if I've got a bunch of people that all know how to do pen testing, but none of them know how to analyze data, well, I should probably go get me a security analyst to be able to figure these things out,
You don't want to force a square peg into a round hole by trying to make him do that.
Absolutely not. And so we focus on that bottom third. And the science in this is very clear. You focus on your champions.
Yeah.
And the champions might focus on who they believe is going to help them. And your best thing is to get the detractors to just neutralize. You want them to be neutral, right? If you can do that, great. But I'm not focusing on that bottom 15%.
Right.
I'm just not. They're either going to self-select out, or they're going to move, or they're going to be neutralized because by peer pressure from around them. And I'm not going to focus on them. I'm focusing on the champions for whatever cause it is I need to have done. And HR every year, and I just go, every year I just go, this is the worst time to be doing anything like this. I don't care about their weakness, and I'm not going to be focusing on it. And it pisses off the HR people every time when I tell them this. I'm like, you're trying to find a reason as to why we shouldn't be giving them more money. I'm going to give them what they deserve, right. And I could care less what their review says. Now, the one part I'll differ a little bit, because I have had a lot more success than failures when it comes to a PIP. But it comes down to, is the person worth saving? Sometimes someone needs a kick in the ass, and some people's kick in the ass is the PIP.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've used the PIP in order to get someone reclassified in a job and put them in a position where they're going to be more successful. Like I had someone that thought they were going to be really good in security operations, passed a lot of tests, was trying to start it up, and really the person wasn't. It's not that person's forte. So I used a PIP in order to reclassify them and put them back into a server environment where they're good.
Right.
So it's a tool. So because if they're not worth saving, I'm not going through the process of PIP. I'll use emails and things like that as the evidence, and it just happens to be, look, you've had your written warnings. Here it is in an email, and you just didn't do it, right. And then you're out the door.
I mean, again, but I think it comes down to how we talk about hiring, right? And I think the current system in most, especially larger companies, where they are using some sort of software package to scan resumes, breeds a bad result. Because what am I asking for, right? You as a leader, can I say, hey, how do I articulate? I want somebody that's got integrity. I want somebody that has these social skills, that has this, right? That they're not this cert, not this thing. And we'll talk about the experience, but I want to get the right culture fit in here. I want to get this type of person in here, right? And I hate to generalize, but quite a few HR departments just want to use these software tools, right? And they don't want to think about it. Go give me an HR person who majored in some, industrial psychology or something. I don't know what their exact major, but it has that experience. And more importantly, is a lover of the human condition, right? Because that is going to help you attract the right type of people, because the prism they look through is going to be different than somebody's like, hey, I'm just going to punch all these into the software and let the resume finder go. And I think, that'll be a big burgeoning area of AI, I think, coming up.
It's one of the things I do like about the academic hiring process, because it's always done by committee, and those committees are always comprised of people from multiple departments,
right,
or multiple schools. Even.
It's how Google hires. The hiring manager gets one interview, but they don't get to say that person's going to be hired. It's done by the committee.
That's right. Yeah, and so like on our committees, you also don't ever have the department chair on the committee. They're not involved. You'll meet the person when they come on campus, but you're not actually part of the hiring committee. It's a slow process because of that, right? But it seems to be pretty effective in sussing out, not only how somebody will fit in, but how they're going to perform as an academic in that institution. So,
I was reading an article yesterday. The Army is radically changing how they're assessing fitness for command at the 06 level, the full colonel level, right? Because that's the big one. It's brigade commanders, right? And Marines, they call it a regiment, but it's the brigade commanders, right? And the traditional methods they don't feel are optimal. So they've started. It's almost like I don't know the length of the course, but it's a multi-week course, and some of it is there's a written component to it, but there's a lot of social interaction, there's psychology. But at the end of it, there's an interview process, and there's a bunch of questions that are being asked. Some of it's based on your past performance and the perception of what you can do in the future. But what they've done to mitigate, and it's funny because when I read it, I'll have an ancillary story as to where I think they got the idea from. But what they've done now is they put a curtain around the candidate. And then he's in the inside of the curtain, or she is on the inside of the curtain, and the people that are assessing them are on the outside. During this whole process, they get a roster number. They don't get a name. They're just random 05, 06 right now, and they're being assessed for command. And during this process, they're asking a bunch of questions. But what they've done is it's trying to remove all of those biases. Now, the person starts talking, you obviously tell whether it's a man or a woman and things like that. But in the military, for those folks that don't know, what you wear on your uniform creates a lot of bias and presupposition about who you are and what you do, right? One of the big examples in the Army is a Ranger tab. You can go to Ranger school and never go to a Ranger battalion. But if you pass Ranger school, it's a pretty big deal in the Army. So they remove all of those. And what they're finding is they're getting better results because you're removing as many unconscious biases as possible. And you don't know that the person is the interviewer. You don't know that the person inside the curtain is an intel officer, an infantry officer, or anything. You're saying, I'm trying to find a great leader. If we find a great leader, then where they're going to go lead is kind of immaterial. They're going to go back to whatever branch of the Army they're in, right?
Right.
This goes back, in my mind, to the Boston Pops. In the earliest days, in symphony hiring in the late early 1900s, symphonies were predominantly male, and a lot of women they would go and they would try out and they would interview and they wouldn't get the job. Largely, the interview is play some music, right? We want to see what you're capable of, and so what they started doing was putting that curtain up. All the people listen on one side of the curtain, all the people, and then the musician on the other side of the curtain. And directly after that, shockingly, a lot more women started to be in the symphony and in the Boston Pops and other orchestras around the nation. Because once you remove the one bias that people weren't able in that time frame to get their head around, we got the best person, right? And it speaks to, in the large thing, the drum I beat a lot is diversity, right? When we talk about diversity, especially in the workplace, through a number of government agencies and programs and and where society is, we have a predefined version of what that looks like and numbers and statistics associated with it. That's where I think is a bad part. I want diversity of thought, because if I have that, everything else takes care of itself, right? All the metrics that we look at, the easy ones, like what color skin, what gender are they, those types of things, right? The things that you can see when people are walking down the street, right? That tells me very little about who you are, right? And what's so important about why I need to know you and why we need to grow in whatever relationship we're going to have, right? So get me people that are diverse of thought, and all the rest of this will take care of itself, right? And once, the metaphor for that, getting rid of that, it's odd that the metaphor to remove that is to put a curtain around people.
Right.
We were doing it in the late 1800s, early 1900s to get musicians, and now we're back to doing it again in the deep into the 21st century already, to be able to remove biases to assess leaders. So how good of a job are we doing as a society to remove those biases?
Speaking of that, what did you think of Joe Biden's VP pick?
I'll say it, what it did was it's a statistical anomaly, right? And I don't mean this in a bad way, right? Pick whoever you want. I don't, they're political candidates. I don't think one is largely better than the other, right? But by announcing, if you say that I think almost 51% of Americans are women, okay? If you then say, I'm only going to hire a woman of color, what are you reducing that aggregate number of potential candidates to, right? My thing is, go out and find the best human being, right? And I understand, and I even say, go find the best woman, right? Go find the best X, whatever that is, right? Don't eliminate any candidate on the basis of pick a multitude of things, right? That's when you want to talk about equality, and we're thinking we're doing the right thing. Do we want people to be gender blind, color blind, and neutralist? We're not there, and it's a big, long discussion, right? But in making a statement that I'm only looking to pick from a certain subset, what potential great human being did they leave out? Yeah. And that's the argument that everybody's going to have. Because if people come in and say, well, we need to do this to right the ship. No, righting the ship is making sure that with absolute clarity and confidence that everybody understands the best person gets picked for the thing that they want to go do. Right? Because at that point, then you have true equality, because nobody's worried, well, I didn't get the job because I'm a white guy that's 50-something. I didn't get the job because I'm a black man, or I'm this or I'm that, right? Once you create the system that says we're here to get the best people, regardless of all the silly things, right? Because that's literally, like, my dad used to say it. He goes, it's probably the best advice I was ever given as a kid. Hey, if you're going to start by not liking somebody from the color of their skin, you're missing a really good opportunity to get to know them and find something you really don't like about them. Right? What he was saying is, hey, once you get to know somebody, you're probably going to like most people. Right? And if you don't want to be ignorant, read. If you don't want to be a racist, travel. And I'll say that for the rest of my life, because one of the problems with the world is people that don't look outside their own culture, outside their own thing, they become myopic, because every day they hear the same thing from the same people. Yep. Right? And I want, like I said, all it comes back to me, diversity for me is diversity of thought. Tell me something I don't want to hear and defend it. I want to do that. I want to have my mind changed, right? Jason, you brought up the cancel culture joke earlier in the thing. Cancel culture is I think one of the most insidious things that's happening right now, because what you're saying is, hey, I don't want to hear.
It's a teacher's fault.
I don't want to hear an opinion that doesn't. Well, it's not. It's parents. I mean, all of a sudden a child doesn't show up at 18, 19 years old and go to college and say, you're right. I should basically, anybody that I disagree with, I should basically mute for the rest of my life.
Right.
Right. It absolutely makes me go mental. Right? If you go look at my Twitter feed and you go, or any social media, I'll have things on what would be considered the extreme left or the extreme right. Right? Change my mind. Like, make me think differently about a paradigm that I currently hold. I think, as a leader, that's hugely important, right? You have to have some core values, but they need to revolve around humanity and how you're going to treat the human race, right? It's the whole thing. It's like, I think one of the great questions, hey, did you have pets growing up? And if yes or no, if not, why? Right? What kind, and if not, why? Well, my mom was allergic to cats and dogs, so we didn't have a cat. Okay, I'll get that. Right? Why do you have other than the egg production, Jason, why do you have all the farm animals and everything? Why? Because it's a great learning opportunity for a child to learn how to care for something and grow. I mean, when you look at all these people that, mass shooter stuff, they either had orders to commit, they were on medicine like HGH, those types of drugs. And a lot of times, like the first was like, hey, they were mean to animals when they were kids.
Yeah.
Right. Life leaves clues. Right. And it's the simple questions. Right. But get down to the core of who somebody is. And for the most part, how many people do you absolutely go, I can't hang out with you? And if you do, it's in a short surface thing. Like what the person's saying is making you go mental in the moment. But over time, if you really got to know that person and they were willing to engage in an honest conversation of listening and having that, having their thoughts be malleable to a certain extent, right? Because most of the time we have our core values and then we never argue about those. We argue about everything on the periphery, right? Because that's the thing that can hurt your feelings in that moment, right? And I'm a big believer. I don't have the right not to be offended, right? Because everything that's ever happened in humanity, every great thing is been a process or a product of dissent. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's really when you start talking about hiring people, to me, it goes into this big thing. It's like, what community or what tribe am I trying to create in here? Right. And I want, it's Richard Branson and a lot of the, big billionaire businessmen say, like, I don't worry about the customers. I worry about my employees, because if the employees aren't happy, the customers aren't going to be happy. Right. And you can see it. Like, now that I've been looking around at other companies this week, looking, because I something piqued my interest with one company. I'm like, let's go and check this out. And companies that have 5-star ratings for customer service, if you go into Indeed or Glass Ceiling or whatever, the Glassdoor, whatever the name of that service is, and you start rooting around about what their employees say about them, the employees are happy. Right. And it's like I said, again, it's not big mystery. Happy employees, happy customers. How do you as a leader make those people feel fulfillment?
Well, I think we did it, guys. We started with chickens. We talked about SANS and hacks and certifications, and we once again ended up with leadership.
Finished with chickens.
Yeah. Well, it's about that time. I got to go check on those bastards.
Little egg
stuck into the dog coop.
Yeah, don't do that. You might. You gotta fix that problem, because you'll be down some chickens in a hurry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We extended the fence down so they can't get under. I don't know what
They're not smart.
No, dude, they're not. They just found a nice place to lay down, so they did.
They have one job. It's to produce eggs, right? The rest of it, you have to kind of look out for them, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right on, guys.
All right, my friends.
Have a good week.
Peace.
Have a good week. Take care. See you soon. Bye.